Marhaba, Ahlan, hello everyone, and Khushamadeen. We welcome you to our webinar on spiritual and ethical development through play. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. It is so good to see you all here today virtually. Before we proceed, we would like to highlight an important announcement. To ensure that we respect this platform at all times, we ask you to kindly adhere to the following code of conduct. We request all of you to refrain from taking any screenshots or video recordings. Taking pictures and recording without permission is prohibited by law, and sharing them on social media and elsewhere is a criminal offense. Parents, we request you to rename your Zoom names to your first and last name and your child's age. If you are joining us together as a family, then please write the names of all the family members joining. We would like to request you to keep yourself on mute during the session so that there is no noise interference. However, you will have the opportunity to ask questions and interact with our guest speaker. If we may request you to use the Zoom chat to type in your questions, and we will answer them during our Q&A segment towards the end. In today's webinar, our presenter will discuss the significance of spiritual and ethical development in early years. We will begin to understand some effective play-based strategies to explore these concepts that are both engaging and meaningful to you as families. Parents, we will be translating the important points from the session in Arabic on the Zoom chat. I would now like to invite our esteemed guest speaker for today's webinar, Naheed Mukhi. Naheed is the pre-primary early childhood development ECD lead for the community in Canada. Her role involves academic and administrative oversight of the ECD programs, teacher training, and development of early years curriculum and resources. Naheed completed her master's degree in child development and education from University of Oxford, UK, and has a bachelor's in psychology from the University of British Columbia, Canada. She is also a graduate of the Institute of Smiley Studies graduate program in Islamic Studies and Humanities program. Her research interests include social emotional development and promoting pluralism in the early childhood. Naheed previously worked as an ECD consultant in Afghanistan, Russia, Syria, and Tajikistan. In her spare time, Naheed supports newly arrived refugees and immigrant families in Edmonton, Alberta, with strength-based knowledge, skills, and connections relevant to parenting and early childhood development. It's a pleasure to have her amongst us today. Welcome, and thank you for joining us this afternoon, Naheed.
Thank you so much for having me here today. It's a pleasure for me to join and give some sort of recommendation strategies for developing ethical and spiritual development in the most important ages of the child. So I'll just share my screen. Perfect, sounds good. So I thought we'll talk today about a little bit about spiritual and ethical development through play. Many of the areas of development we talk about in early years, but one of the most fundamental topic, which is very much important to the context that we live in and the times we live in, is spiritual and ethical development. So in terms of the hope for today's session, I'll go over I'll very briefly go over the importance and significance of spiritual and ethical development in the early years, in the early childhood development years. I'll talk a little bit about how play as a pedagogy, as a method can be used to look at spiritual and ethical development and how much important play is in early years. And then lastly, which is the better half of the session, we'll talk about what are some of the activities and strategies that we can use for children from birth all the way to age 6, our ECD population, to inculcate the ideas, the concepts, the ethical principles very early on in life. Most of the activities we'll talk about are low cost, no cost. So can be easily done with little or no materials out there for you as a parent or you as the caregiver of the child. So before I diverge, I dive into the conversation about play, ethical, and spiritual development, I think I wanted to start off with this amazing speech of Maulana Hazrat Imam in Mombasa, Kenya, 14th August 2007. And Maulana Hazrat Imam talks about that, but we sometimes give too little attention to the schools which prepare young children for life itself in all its holistic dimensions. And yet, the evidence accumulates steadily, showing that an investment made in the earliest preschool years can bring enormous dividends as a child proceeds from one level of education to another. And I think this resonates time and time again. Neuroscience has shown us, the educational field has been very much clear how the early years of a child's life are so fundamental, so crucial, because they set the foundation for lifelong learning. And the kind of experience that you as a parent, you as a caregiver provide, the preschool teachers that provide, shapes the child's, not just the child's brain, but also the way of looking at the world itself. And I think that's why it's so much important that we invest a lot of time, we invest a lot of efforts and a lot of energy by inculcating these things very, very early on in life, because that's where the brain is in its maximum capacity to develop. And we're shaping the behaviors from early on that has a longer benefit, or as the speech of Hazrat Imam talks about, has enormous dividends and returns as the child's proceeding through his or her life. So what I'll do now is I'll talk a little bit about from a theoretical or academic lens. So I'll talk about development in play, and then we'll diverge into the conversation of spiritual and ethical development. So whenever we're talking about child development, and this is something that the theory of ECD, this is a concept that's very much popular in the theory of ECD, is the domains of development, the areas of development. So when you're playing with the child, when you're teaching a child, when you're interacting with the child, these are 4 areas that a parent, a teacher focuses on. Number 1 is the cognitive area. This is where you're trying to inculcate skills of brain development, of logical thinking. So you're looking at skills like attention, skills like memory, skills like problem solving. So you give the child a puzzle and then they figure out what the answer is. You give the child 4 things and you try to quiz them, okay, which one is an animal, which one is a bird, things like that. So you're building concepts, but you're also building the brain foundation for all the logical and reasoning thinking. Another one is physical development, which is the movement of the big muscles, so your arms, your legs, your core. And this is very much beneficial as the child's learning how to walk, how to run, how to kick. In addition to that, you're spending a lot of time on small muscles, so your pincer grips, like we call in the field, so your finger and your thumb, because you need that sort of small muscle movement to develop in early years for the child to learn how to write, how to pick up things, how to draw, things like that. And then you're looking at language. We understand that language development is also very much foundational in early years, because we work with the child for not just uttering language, but also understanding language. So you're looking at expressive language, so the child's able to talk and communicate, but also the child's able to understand what they're saying. And in addition to that, you're working with the child on the written skills, right, as they're developing. And last but not the least, and something that I'm very passionate about, is social emotional development, where you're investing a lot of time and effort so the child knows how to manage emotions, how to regulate emotions, how to label and identify its own feeling, whether it's feeling sad, it's feeling happy, the child's, and also able to understand and empathize with the feelings of anybody else. So when you're looking at child development, what are some of the things that I as a parent should be doing? We focus on all 4. But one fundamental thing, and I think this is something that I believe, is that when we're looking at spiritual development or ethical development, we're not just looking in one area, we're looking at an entire context. It's a combination of cognitive, language, physical, and social emotional that together brings about the spiritual and the ethical development in a child. And we know early on that ethical and spiritual development come in many people understand that later on, if we teach the child what's right and wrong, they would come later in life. But we know through studies that a child, as prenatally, when they're in the womb of the mother, but also as they're born from birth onwards, they understand and they try to absorb in spiritual and ethical development principles. So between birth to age 1, a child, when a parent's taking care of the child, they're providing them social and emotional support and care, but also physical care by feeding them. They understand the idea that what is safe, what is not safe. This is right. This is how it's supposed to happen. When a parent swaddles the child, sings to the child, takes care of its needs, the child, that infant itself, develops the notion of what is right. This is the right way to treat people. This is the right way to show love and affection. This is the right way. So that concept of right and wrong, especially the concept of right and what feels right, is developed very much early on in infant years. When we move on to the toddler years, we look at how the child understands what's okay and what's not okay. And this is the time where they start feeling a little bit of feeling of shame, a little bit of guilt. And these are the feelings that are developing. So we understand that by inculcating ethical as well as spiritual development and ideas and strategies, a toddler is able to shape their thinking very early on. And when I say toddler, I mean from age, for 24 months, from age 1 to age 3. So early on, it knows what's okay, what's not okay. A toddler is able to feel a lot of different feelings beyond happy and sad, like I said, guilt. And then we come into the wonderful age of preschool, ages 4 to 5 or 4 to 6. And this is where a major brain development cycle happens, which is called, in literature, it's called theory of mind. But essentially, this is the time after age 3, it starts developing. We see it very much in age 4, where the child's able to not only identify their own feelings, but they're also able to empathize, understand what the other person's going through. And this is an amazing skill that nature gives to children, to humans at the age of around 3 and 4, where they can sit there and think, what is my friend going through? If my friend has tears coming down, that must mean that my friend's crying. That essential, crucial skill of putting yourself in someone else's shoes actually develops at age 3 and 4. And that is why I think this topic is of so much importance, is because all these lifelong skills of what is right, what is wrong, they are developed very early on in life, starting birth or even prenatally. Just to define what I mean by ethically and ethical as well as spiritual development, before I go into the sort of a concept building, is ethics is mostly defined in the field as something that's knowing what's morally right and knowing what's morally wrong, the good or the bad, taking decision between what is right, what feels right, and taking decision what's wrong. In terms of spiritual development, now, this is a very new term that's been used in the field of early childhood and very much relevant to our context. Usually, the concept of soul, regardless of being attached to religion or not, is very much important. So spiritual development is the development of the soul. Now, in the theory, people say it is regardless of religion or not. But within our understanding, it's essentially understanding that every child has been given a soul, and you do many things to ensure that they're able to understand that there's something beyond them. There's something that they're answerable to. There's something that they should be doing in order to stay on the right path, right? So that's why spiritual development is something that's, even though it's a very emerging concept in the field, it could be secular as well. A lot of people define spiritual development as having a sense of nature-based things. So taking care of nature, looking at nature as this responsibility, that's also defined in spiritual development. to ease up and make it a little bit more digestible, and moving away from the a little bit of the theory. So I'll give some examples. So everything that I'll mention, the three things that I'll be mentioning, they are all part of spiritual and ethical development, and which we do on a daily basis with the child and should be doing with the child. So one of them is conceptual development, developing of concepts. We call it foundational concept development. So concepts like Allah is the creator, concept like Allah created the world. Everything you see, a flower, you see an animal, you see other people, you see your grandparents, everything else is created by Allah, the creator. So that's a concept that we're trying to introduce in early years. And there are other concepts as well that we'll talk about, we'll see. Another concept that we, especially relevant to our context, is that the love for Maulana Hazrat Imam. So we developed that through many different ways. We'll talk a little bit more strategies, books, things like that, to develop that concept that guidance comes from Maulana Hazrat Imam and the love for Maulana Hazrat Imam, another important concept that we can work on with the child. Then we come to values and ethical development. This is where we inculcate values like care, kindness, sharing, right? Where we talked about ethical development as something that's right, something to do, something that's okay, and something that's not okay. Caring is okay. Caring is a good thing. Kindness is a good thing. Sharing is a good thing. So we're inculcating these wonderful, beautiful concepts of taking care of others, being kind to others. And this falls in the realm of ethical and value education. And then lastly, within the spiritual and ethical development are identity markers, or celebrating differences. This harps on the concept of pluralism, that each one of us is different. Each one of us is special and unique in our own way. And each one of us has something to contribute. And together we come, together we join hands, and there's always something to learn, to give and to take from each other. So this is the idea of pluralism. Another thing, in order to feel a sense of spiritual and ethical development, is your own identity as a Muslim, your own identity as the various layers that you wear as a human, whether it's the religious layers, whether it's the social layers. And that's why we can celebrate that through food, through music, through celebrating festivals, to have a strong sense of self. Who am I? What are the things that define me? And that's where the identity markers. And we'll talk about lots of examples, so don't worry. I just wanted to put the building blocks out there of spiritual and ethical development in early years. All right, so what we will do now is I want to understand what you think when so I explained the spiritual and ethical development from a theoretical, from an academic lens. But I thought I'll ask all of you, what do you mean by spiritual and ethical development of a young child? So what I will do is, before I go into the idea of play and how play is important, I'm going to put up a poll. I invite all of you to go to www.menti.com, put this code in that you can see, and answer in a word or two the question of what comes to mind when you think of spiritual and ethical development of a young child. So I'm gonna read some of the responses, keep adding to it, but I think a lot of you said gratitude. I think that's one of the most popular one, and that's why it's the biggest of all. So gratitude is definitely an important ethical skill or ethical concept that we want the child to develop, that being thankful, being appreciative of not just what kind of things they've been given by Allah, but also by different people, what they do for them, right? So identity is definitely an important one. And we talked about how you look at the different layers that make you who you are. Values, for sure. Ethical development is all about values, or good values, as someone said. And these include empathy, taking someone else's perspective. These include the sense of right and wrong. This includes consciousness. This includes devotion. This includes attitude towards others. This also includes passion and love. I think I'll read the chat responses a little bit. Counting one's blessing, definitely gratitude, self-understanding, commitment, and kindness. Absolutely. So heads on, I think these are some of the essential skills, services devotion, respect. These are essential skills when we think about spiritual and ethical development. And these are things that we want to start the child soaking in, having an understanding, and inculcate in early years. Now, let's talk about how do we do that. So let me switch my screens. All right. So there are many ways of inculcating that in early years. And today I thought I'll focus on one sort of a pedagogy, a method to look at how can we inculcate spiritual and ethical development. So storytelling is one way, reading books is one way. Another way is teaching the child the concepts by having a conversation, right? You sit down on a Saturday morning or a Friday morning and teach them the different concepts. You teach them about what's right, what's wrong. But one of the ways which is very much popular, but enjoyable, full of joy, is the idea of play. And we can use this play methodology as pedagogy to understand, to teach the child about, and to inculcate that skill of spiritual and ethical development. So I'll talk a little bit about play. Most of you, I think, I'm hoping, know why play is important, how it's one of the most important thing in early years and why it's important. So we'll talk about what is play and why is play so much significant that everyone talks about play. So one definition of play is that it's a vehicle for learning the things that the child wants to learn and for learning the things the teacher wants to teach. Essentially what, and you have to remember in early years, the child's natural tendencies to play. This is something, again, that's given to the child as they're born, that they play. When you look at a baby that's born an infant, you'll see them smiling, cooing, interacting with you, or touching things and exploring and trying to figure out what that is. That's all part of the play tendency, which is very much natural. And that is why you use that natural tendency to play, to learn the things, to have the child explore, look at different options. And for also, it's a great way of a parent, of a teacher, to use it, to harness it, to teach them what they want, to help them explore. I think someone wrote a sense of awe and wonder. And that's where play comes in, because the child is looking at objects, exploring, because by nature, children are curious. They love to explore and they love to play. This is something that comes to them naturally. So why not use the idea of play to develop their skills, to adapt to the curriculum and understand their key concepts? There's many different benefits to play as well. We know in early years that play is not just frivolous. It's not just something that you do with the child. It helps actually shape the brain in terms of structure, but also functioning. So play has been shown to have a very much direct effect on brain. You can see children who play in a certain hours, and these studies have been done on rats. They've been done on multiple animals like monkeys, to see monkeys that play every day have a very different sort of a brain structure than monkeys that are just sitting there idle and not doing anything. So there's indirect effect to brain structure, but also there's direct effect, very much so. We also see that there's a lot of different, when a child plays, brain studies have shown us that different parts of the brain light up. These are things that later on we'll need those same parts we need, those connections we need on those same parts for decision making, for executive functioning, for remembering things, for better social and emotional mental health. Play also allows the child to use their creativity while developing their imagination. And we talked about how different domains of development. Play affects each one because the child's using language, the child's moving around, right? So physical development, the child's using language and talking and negotiating and pretending. Again, language development, we see the child reasoning, problem solving. So, and then they're developing something creative. That's because they're coming something from their own. Like I said, it's also shown to improve in executive functioning, so decision-making, memory skills, what is right, what's wrong, problem solving. In language, in early math skills, and social development, it also helps children learn how to negotiate, how to conflict manage, something a very important skill in adulthood. And like I said, physical development and health, and an enhanced sense of self. Who am I, what I like, what I don't like. It's a great way for even less verbal children to express their frustration, their experiences, and their view. So children, as they're learning to talk, especially in the early years, when they don't have the right vocabulary, when they don't have the right language skill set, especially in terms of expression, it allows the parents to get a full understanding of what's happening, what are the kind of things that they're thinking. So it's a great method to understand what's going in a child's brain. And then we also know, and like I talked about, under-directed play, where a parent does not intervene or does not control the story. It allows the children to, multiple children to work together. This is great for siblings to work out how to negotiate, how to share things, how to resolve conflicts, and how to advocate for oneself and say, this is my turn to play now. Can I have this toy, please? So wonderful, wonderful things can happen just by the magic of play. Play has many different ways and categories. One of them that we notice early on in life is object play. This is where a child, especially an infant or a toddler, is exploring on objects. So a toy or different kinds of things, or a shaker, things like that. So they're just exploring the different properties of and touching and feeling it with their hands, shaking it and hearing it through different senses. So that's object play, exploring an object. Another kind of play is physical, locomotor, or rough and tumble play. This can mean finger play. So you know how when you play with the child, you use your fingers. So Incy Spider or things like that. That's called finger play. You're using your fingers to play with the child, right? But also physical play. So you're running around, you're playing hide and seek in older years. You're running, just running itself is another way of playing. Rough and tumble play is something that we've seen animals do. So we would see them being a little bit aggressive, but also enjoying and taking a little bit of risk. So climbing things, climbing chairs, which sometimes can be unsafe, but just exploring what's safe, what's not safe. That's called rough and tumble play. You look at social and pretend play, which is a great way of children taking social roles, pretending to be a doctor, pretending to be mommy, pretending to be a teacher. And this is where the child, based on their observations of the world and the people around, they start pretending to be someone else. Perhaps a mommy taking care of a baby, right? So this is a great way for imagination skills, we know. This is a great way of the child just looking at the world and interacting and picking up on things and then expressing them through play. Constructive play, another very popular one, where we give the child a blocks or a Play-Doh or something, where they make something out of a material. And then last but not the least, symbolic play, where an object is a sort of representation of something else. So you use a banana to pretend it's a phone, and you put a banana on your ear and say, hello, how are you? Things like that. Or you use a spoon to play some music. That's another thing, that you're using an object for other purposes than what it was meant for. And this again is full of imagination, full of creativity, and lots of fun. So play is essentially something that's very much joyful. It comes to the child naturally. And you as a parent, when you're playing, or a caregiver, you as a parent or a caregiver, or what you call a guardian, is not only investing in the child's development, brain development, social emotional development, but you're also focusing on your relationship with the child. When you're playing, or when siblings are playing, or when a parent and a child is playing, they're nurturing, they're expressing their joy, their love, their affection, and they're sort of having that sort of two-way communication, right? So you say something, the child says something back, you pass them something and they pass you something back, just simply by passing a ball. You're doing so much of communication that's happening. And that's so much essential for the parent-child relationship, but also it's very much important for the relationship that sets up later in life as the child meets more people, whether it's peers, whether it's friends, whether it's teachers growing up, whether it's other people around in the community. So play, not just for the child, but also for relationship building, is amazing and great. All right. So I'm gonna pause here, and I want you to take 2 minutes and think about what we talked about. So we talked about spiritual and ethical development. We talked about how important it is and how fundamental it is to start building the foundations of spiritual and ethical development early on in life. We also talked about one way that we can enhance that spiritual and ethical development is through the idea of play. So now for the latter half of the session, what I will do is I'm going to talk about what are some of the ideas that we can play with using the concept of spiritual and ethical development. So these ideas are mostly based on the work that I do in the field. Some of these ideas will very much be very easy to apply in your everyday life. Some of them is something that you need to maybe plan a little bit ahead with materials and stuff. But all the materials, I believe and I hope is, my hope is that it's very much easily available at home. So you can do it very easily, especially at this time because of COVID, where the child's not able to interact with other peers and siblings, other peers of people outside of the family, and especially because these are things that you can easily get from the home, despite the circumstances we're living in. So I'll start with a very basic idea of exploration. This can harp and connect to our foundational concepts. So we talked about the awe and wonder of the world. We talked about the concept of Allah, the creator. And an excellent way to teach that to the child is through sensory play. So some ideas is perhaps especially for infants and toddlers, is just taking a treasure, what I call a treasure basket. Take a basket, take a container, grab some natural things from around the house or right outside. So orange, a fruit or something, and you can cut the slices of the fruit and let the child taste it, let the child smell it, let the child feel the texture of it. So, orange texture is a little bit wrinkly, but banana structure, it's smooth. So put some fruit baskets along and let the child just explore them. And as the child's exploring them, you can just as an adult talk about who created that? Who made these wonderful, colorful plants or food? You can do the same thing with nature. So a stone that's very small, but even if it's safe, or a flower, you can put a little bit of a flower, a stick as the child's growing up, and it's much more safer. So taking a basket, just picking up some natural objects and putting in a basket and let the child explore. And as they're exploring, touching, putting it in their mouth, tasting it, licking it, you're building in the concept of how Allah is the one that created it. You're also bringing in the concept of gratitude. I think someone talked about it. So you can say, oh my gosh, wow, what a beautiful fruit. Look at it. Or what a beautiful flower. It's green in color. Thank you, Allah, for making such a beautiful flower. It smells so nice. Let's smell it together. So you're playing, but you're also harping that principle of gratitude in the child very much early on in life. And, we're so lucky that we have these wonderful fruits to eat, right? Similarly, you're looking at a little bit more sensory development. So you're picking up 5 things and you're labeling their features, right? So picture on the left is about different things that you can use to hear. We created baskets and we put natural things. We put things that you use to hear. So you can use, for example, use a mic or some music. How do you hear music? You hear it with your ears. Who gave you the ears? Allah gave you the ears. You put something, sort of a smell. So one of the teachers that I work with, she took a tissue paper and she sprayed it with a perfume that the child really liked, the mom's perfume. And then she brought that as a sensory toy, and then she made the child smell it. This is a toddler child, and said, oh, "What do you smell? So beautiful smell. How can you smell it? You smell it with the nose." And who gave you the nose? Allah gave you the nose. Thank you, Allah, for giving me a wonderful nose so I can smell such delicious things. Other thing is you can bring something that smells bad, right? A garbage bin or something. Again, using the idea of senses and saying, oh no, it smells so bad. Oh my gosh. But how did we know it smells bad? Our nose, right? So you're talking about senses, you're labeling the 5 senses, but you're also appreciating, showing gratitude, building in the concept of Allah, the creator, and gratitude. I hope that makes sense. And you can see these are everyday objects that you use. Another wonderful way is pretend play. Pretend play is this idea where it can go on for hours because the child is thinking, building, being creative. You can use this for a lot of different ideas. So one of the things that we were doing was that foundational concept building of Prophet Muhammad. And what we did was we got some basic things and let the child build the Kaaba. Or you can do it for construction identity markers, right? To the local community center, just building in the child's identity. That every evening we go to the local community center and giving them some blocks and they can pretend how they're going. In addition to that, for values like sharing and caring and taking care of people around, having some sort of props or something. So one of the concepts that we build in early years is about community helpers, people around us that help our kind and that take care of us. The child on the right, you can see, is pretending to be a fireman. I don't know if it's clear or not, but, and like I said, many of the activities are low cost. So you don't need sort of a pipe to put out the fire. This child's actually using a scarf of his mom to put out the fire. So he stretched that scarf out and he started making water noises. This is a 4-year-old child. And he's like, psh, oh, there's fires out there. I'm a firefighter. So you can see that entire, just by providing them with very local things and say, what does a firefighter do? Firefighter puts out fire. They're so kind. They help us. Imagine if there was a fire in our house, who would be the one coming in to save us, to rescue us, to protect us and take care of us? Firefighters, yeah, they're very kind. Similarly, you can pretend play to be a doctor, a nurse, a teacher, and having that sort of kindness concept built in. But also, like you said on the picture on the right, using pretend play to have foundational concepts, Allah the Creator, Prophet Muhammad, the love of Maulana Hazrat Imam, things like that. All right, next one. Another concept, another way of looking at play and Allah's creation is by using loose materials. Loose materials is a concept in early years where you don't need expensive hi-fi toys for the child to learn. What you're essentially doing is collecting some small things from around you and giving it to the child, and then the child makes meaning out of it. So the picture on the left shows some pebbles, some stones, and some sticks that the child, the parent and the child picked up on their walk outside, and they brought it in the house. And then they explored this entire concept of who created the rocks, created the sticks, so Allah the Creator. And then you give that child those things and then they set up their own patterns with it. Again, a very creative thing to play around how they want to do it. And it's very much low cost, no cost. So that's loose materials. Another concept, which is about taking care of the world. I think I talked about environmental stewardship, taking care of the world that you've been given in, or caring for the world, as I call it, a value, is simply by taking a bucket. We took a bucket and we put some water in. You can do it with a small bowl or a large bowl as well if you have it in the kitchen. And you put some animals in it. If you have sea animals, great. If you don't put some animals in it, and let the child play with it, explore it, and see, oh my gosh, they're in the ocean, they're in the sea, they're having so much fun, they're playing in the water. And then what you do is you put some garbage. So you collect some recycler. If you have those Coke cans, if you have a chips or a potato chips wrapper after the child's done, save those things, like all the garbage that you might have been thrown, bring it back and put that in that water. And then have the child see, oh my gosh, look at what happened to the ocean. It's so dirty. And have a monkey get stuck in that, or have, if you have those nets where the fruits are tied into, you can put that, you can put a plastic bag and show the child, oh no, look, the fish got stuck in the bag. Oh no, look what happens when we don't take care of the world. Poor animals, look, they're hurt. So what you're doing is you're showing that concept of care, and then asking the child to take out each garbage, the canned Coke, the Coke can, taking out the plastic bag, taking out the chips wrapper and cleaning up the ocean, and say, oh, finally, play. Now these animals can enjoy and play because we've cleaned the ocean, we've taken care of the world, we're taking care of the ocean. So just by that, indulging the child into that play, you were teaching such an important concept of taking care of the world and how it's our responsibility and how we owe this to the animals in the ocean and around us. You can do the same thing with a forest or something where you're throwing garbage and animals are getting stuck. So you create sort of a, I don't know, get some green cloth, spread it out, pretend it to be a forest, and do the exact same thing in caring of the world. I'm going to switch screens now and talk about, you can also show kindness through STEM activities. So an area that's very much newly and excitingly developed in the area in early childhood is called STEM. STEM stands for science, technology, engineering, and math. And these are activities that harp on the concept of science and technology and math and even arts and mathematics to teach the child many things. So what I will show you is essentially a small video clip of this teacher who tries to teach the idea of kindness using a scientific activity. So let's watch it together.
Topic was about gift of kindness, specifically sharing. So I came up with the science experiment and I showed this to kids and it goes so well with the lesson. So this is how I teach and I relate this science experiment with the topic kindness, specifically sharing. So boys and girls, this is the whole world that Allah created. Okay, this plate represents a world. Okay, a plate full of milk. Why milk? Because it's so pure, so white. Yeah, Allah created a beautiful world. And now in the world, in this world, Allah also created people. Yeah, remember we talked about Allah's creation? So I'm going to use some food coloring. So there is a boy with a green shirt in this world. Yeah. There's also a girl with a pink skirt. So these are all pretend people, see, in the milk. So these are the people in the world, okay, who are looking for help, okay, who are looking for love. And Allah created all these people. Now, I see that they are not sharing with each other anything. They are not playing with each other, or they're not having fun. I know we don't go outside much nowadays, but we spend so much time with the family. So imagine this as a family. They are not sharing at all. They're not happy with each other at all. Then there came, this is us. This is me. Okay, a Q-tip. The Q-tip represents me, us. Allah created us too. So then Allah has already put so much kindness in us. We were born with kindness, you know? Our job is to spread that kindness in the world that Allah created. Yeah. So all this Q-tip has to do is to go in this world, in this milk, and spread the kindness, spread the notion of sharing. Yeah. So this is me. And I'm going to do that right now. I'm going to go into this world and touch and share and share some kind words with one person. And I want you to see what happens to that person. What happens? Is he happy or is he sad? Is he going to the other person and sharing the kindness, or is he still staying to himself? I want you to look really carefully. So this is me going into the world. I'm going to go and talk to one person, share kind words. What just happened? I'm going to another one. Wow, I see people are so happy and spreading kindness. Yeah. So this is what happens when we share kind words with one person. That person is going to the next person, and the next person is going to the next one and spread kindness. You see how colorful the world became now, right? This is what Allah wants from us. Spread love.
So I think you get the idea. And this is simply milk. The Q-tip was dipped in dishwasher liquid, so you can dip that in. And when you touch the milk, the milk sort of curdles. But because if you put food coloring in there, the curdle would be shown, so it'll spread. So you're using a scientific experiment to explain such a wonderful concept of kindness. Another idea that we did within our classes was take a bowl of water, taking a clear bowl, putting water in it, and then taking a big object and a small object. So perhaps you take a Lego block, which is small in size, and then you take a Lego block that's big in size. And then you drop the big Lego in the water. And this is using the effect of the ripple effect. When you put something in water, it creates that waves out there, right? So you put the big Lego in the water, ask the child to put it, and you'll see those big waves, right? But then you ask, and then you ask the child to put the small thing in. But even if you put the small thing in, you'll see the ripple effect. It's not going to be as big, but it still create that stir in the water. And you connect it back to the idea of kindness, that no matter what amount of kind action that you do or a kind word you say, whether it's a big action or whether it's a small action, it's going to have an effect. It's going to make a change, right? So you're doing it using a science experiment. So STEM activities are wonderful. Kids love them. And why not use them, such a great concepts to teach ethical and spiritual values, like kindness, like sharing, as you saw in the video. Couple more things before I open up for Q&A. So that was the STEM idea, and there's multiple ideas that you could use. This was only one of them that our wonderful teacher was able to record for us. In addition to that, you're looking, cooking is a great way of playing, but also looking at identity markers. So one of the pictures on the right shows children together making syrup, milk, sugar, flour, and butter, mixing it together, and then the parent putting it on the stove and then eating it together. Another one is making cupcakes together for Maulana Hazar Imam's birthday, setting up the Hafseen table, so the 7 elements that you see in the Hafseen table, just putting them on the table, decorating with the child for Eid, because it's an identity marker of, for us, a pluralistic way of celebrating Eid in different ways. You and the child can together create an Eid dessert together, and involving the child into making them and talking about, oh my gosh, Eid is coming. Let's, we're celebrating by making X, Y, and Z dessert, right? And then lastly, using fruits and vegetable salads. So helping the child, you're cutting the vegetables, you're creating a medley, and then you're using this wonderful world. So you can use that as a concept of pluralism. So you can say, look at the different colors in that salad. Oh my gosh, this is just like the world where everyone is different, and together they create this yummy, delicious salad. Or you can use it for the foundational concept of Allah, the creator, who gave us these fruits and vegetables. Allah gave it to us, right? So just using that entire idea of cooking and decorating and celebrating together. This is another way of much more physical in nature. So you go out and you do a wonder hunt in nature. And rather than just picking up things, you do sort of an exploration. So let's go around and see something that is as big as your head. Let's go around and see if you can find something alive, something striped or speckled, something very small, something very big. So the child's exploring the nature, but rather than just letting them randomly pick up things, you're giving them sort of a cognitive principle of, okay, let's find something that's very, very small, very, very big, something that's alive, things like that. And then some of the things that you do collect on your nature walk, you can have some sort of a wonder box or a treasure box and bring it back, and you can use it for the loose materials like we talked about. In addition to that, the team had asked me if there are any books or literature available to look at the idea of spiritual and ethical development in addition to the ideas that presented. So I've provided a list of books to the team that they'll be sharing with you, but you can essentially use a secular book like The Hungry Caterpillar, which talks about nature, which talks about animal, and you can easily turn into, use it for conceptual building, like who created the caterpillar, the different things that the caterpillar eats when it's hungry, and it turns into a butterfly. So who turned the caterpillar into a beautiful butterfly? So you can use these. There are also books available by institution itself. So there's an ABC book that's very much readily available by Aga Museum, and it talks about A for Arch, so Muslim architecture, so identity marker again. It talks about C for care. So these are books that are built by the people for the purposes of spiritual and ethical development. There are also other books by Muslim writers. One of them in the list that will be given to you is called Golden Domes and Silver Lanterns. I actually have this book, and this is all about Muslim identity, but particularly it uses colors to talk about red, blue, green, but found in Muslim architecture. Great way for identity building. The same book, the same author, Henna Khan, has another book, but that's on shapes rather than colors. Great way. And then lastly, I just want to bring up the idea that sometimes you don't have to look for a secular book and attach it. You can create your own books. So the last thing I would share with you is show you an example of a local book that we created. I wrote this book to talk about the ethical and the spiritual concepts. One of them is about taking care of the world. So this is based on the Al-Azhar Park, and it's all about the idea of this child called Sinan, who with his Jadda, which is the grandmother, talks about how he's been learning about taking care of the world and taking care of the environment. And that's where his grandmother tells him that, you know, that Al-Azhar Park in Cairo used to be a garbage place where people would throw in garbage, people would throw in all the dirty things. And then Maulana Hazar Imam made a very caring choice of turning that awful smelling, dirty place into a beautiful park, which is called Al-Azhar, and now it has lots of trees, how it turned into from this garbage dumping place to a beautiful place. And now people come in and play in this garden. So just like Maulana Hazar Imam, you can also ensure that you take care of the world and make a caring choice. Hazar Imam made the caring choice of turning this garbage dump into a park. What can you do to take care of the world? You can perhaps, close your water when you're brushing so you don't waste water. So things like that. Another book that I wrote was about the Hafseen table, connected to the celebration of the arrival of spring. And you can see this story, this was a nonfiction story about this boy describing what goes on the Hafseen table, but using very much child-friendly language. So one of the first one is apple. Apple's called seb in Persian, and it's red and delicious. The second one is grass. We call it sabzi, and it's green in color where we water every day, and then looking at senses, so on and so forth, right? So you don't have to wait for the books. If there isn't a book, it's very easy taking a word processor, putting some free images in, which I have done. These are all images that were open access, and just creating a book for the child and reading it together on an evening, and using those same principles of foundational concepts, the ethical concepts, and the identity markers that we talked about. I'm quickly going to show you the list that the team will share, and it's based around those three principles. So this is the list that has Amazon UAE links. It's some books to look into if you're looking for a reading list for your children. Like I said, some of them are about concepts like Allah the Creator. Some of them are about guidance and support. So there's a book called The Invisible String, which I love, absolutely. And it's about this boy who's very frightened at night because of lightning. And the mom says, okay, why don't you go in your room and I'm with you. There's an invisible string that you and I are connected with, in a very child-friendly way. And then you use that same story to talk about the love of Maulana Hazrat Imam, that even though he's not with us physically, he's always connected to us like an invisible string. Or the kissing hand, another great story. Ethical developments, I've given you some list of books for kindness, for diversity, for environmental stewardship, taking care of the world like we talked about. And lastly, I've given you some books in the realm of identity markers. As you can see, I put both the Henna Khan books, the Akka Museum that we saw, to talk about Muslim festivals, Muslim identity, and Muslim culture. I think that's it from my end. Yes.
Nahi, we would request you to please show us some pages of your books that you have written, if that's possible.
Sure.
And
yeah.
lastly, we could not see the entire list. So if there's any way we can see it again.
Okay, so this is the book that, this is the Al-Azhar book. It's called From Trash to Treasure. And we've used pictures from AKDN to create this book. So I'll quickly go over. Right, so this is about, these are all free images from open sources, and we talk about where is Africa, and then the grandmother greets Sinan. It's about Sinan and his grandmother, right? And then she says, what are some of the ways that you take care of the environment? And we had introduced environment as a word early on. So making sure that the vocabulary that you use, it's scaffolded, it's repeated again in the stories. And we can give water to the plants. We should not throw garbage. These are some of the things that you can do. And did you know that Al-Azhar Park was once used to be a place where everyone dumped their garbage? So Nan says, really? Yes, Jadda says, many years ago in this neighborhood, people would take all their garbage, this is for an age 4 kid, and throw it in the middle of the city, and the area became smelly. And then one day, Maulana Hazrat Imam decided to turn the garbage dump into a beautiful Al-Azhar Park. So then you put pictures of the Al-Azhar Park, again, found on the website, and how families enjoy it now, and they have a park that's clean. Yeah, and then, yeah, that's about it. The Hafseen story is similarly, I put some numbers in, so I'm teaching my, I was thinking perhaps looking at colors, looking at numbers, some foundational concept building of cognition, numbers and colors and things like that, but also sense of taste. So you can see Sirka is vinegar, and how does this vinegar taste like? It tastes very, very sour. That's why you make a funny face. It's just adding some anu, garlic. These are things that go, the 7 things that go on the Hafseen table, right? Yeah. There you go.
That's wonderful. Thank you for sharing
No
that.
worries, no worries. And I'll quickly show you the list that you were talking about. And I think the team will be providing it to them. But yeah, this is the list that I've compiled, some of the books that I personally recommend. I don't know if you know about Rainbow Fish, but Rainbow Fish is an excellent book, and it's about not just sharing, but also this idea that the more kind you, how to make friends as well. So you can use it in multiple manner, where this fish has shiny scales. She's the only fish in the water that has shiny scales, and everyone wants a piece of that scale, but she says no, and she's proud and arrogant, and then she loses friends. And then how she shares her skills with everybody, so everybody has this beautiful scale, and that's so it's sharing, but it's also about arrogance, being proud, and how do you make friends at school. So yeah, and I'll ask the team to share it with all of you. So that's about it from my end. Before we go into the Q&A, I wanted to ask if anyone has any additional ideas that sparked an idea that they probably did as a family to install spiritual and ethical development in early years. You can unmute yourself, or you can put it in the chat. I think those of you who are joining in today, most of you might have tried something exciting, fun with the children to harp that spiritual and ethical development. So I'll open up the forum now. In addition to that, if you have any questions, this is the time to ask questions as well. So please, this would be a forum, and I'll let the moderator talk about how the Q&A will work. But if you don't have a question, but if you have an idea, please share it with the group as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nahi. That was really inspiring, especially those practical tips and the books that you have shared with us. Parents, the forum is now open for questions and answers. You can you can use the Zoom chat to ask your questions, and we'll try to address them, address as many as possible. I think Lena has already raised her hand.
Yes, thank you very much. Ali Madad, everybody. I want to share one example that I have used it in my family with my friend, with my kids for rising up the spiritual life. So in Arabic, we have one proverb called "At-taqiyya tanfa ad-dhurriya," means obeying God and doing good deeds that protect your kids, your children and grandchildren. So always I tell my 5 kids that I used to have my grandma. So she was too much with giving and helping people in need, and she used to have this habit. Every day she used to cook over size of her family. So they used people to tell her, "Why you are cooking extra?" And she used to be keeping quiet. So she used to take the extra and sit in front of her house, waiting for the people from coming out from Jamaat Khana, and whoever wants to pass, they can take. And they will not feel shy that this one need or doesn't need. So whoever wants to take, they will take, and obviously the one who need it, they will take for sure. So I used to use this example to tell my kids how nice when we are kindness, and when we are kind, and how kindness can protect us and even protects our family. Thank you.
Thank you, Lena, for sharing that. That's an excellent way of bringing the quotation or a life lesson into such a child-friendly, such an enjoyable way. Thank you so much.
Now, Nahid, I have a couple of questions here already. Given the COVID situation where parents are working from home, the ideas that you have shared with us, those are absolutely inspiring. But again, there is a time crunch involved. So, and especially if there are children, more than one children in the home, and especially if they're aged 4 and 6. So, how do we deal with that situation?
Sure, I think that's a very relevant question. And I think when you're designing things, I think you're thinking of multiple ways. So in many cases, the child can explore these concepts together, right? So if you're looking at the treasure basket, I'll use the example of a treasure basket. You're sitting on your work desk, and this is something that I've seen in my own family people do. So you're sitting on a work desk right before you resume your work. You create the treasure basket, and you let the child explore. So a toddler sitting on the floor or on in their little bed or crib, you just put the treasure basket and let them explore. And your time to time, you're doing that foundational building while doing your work as well, which is very much easy. Sometimes if you have older siblings and a younger siblings, you can put a game together for them and they can explore alongside each other. Pretend play is a great way of doing it. If you have children, 2 preschoolers or a kindergartner or a preschooler, just set up the area and let them play, and just doing some foundational concepts from time to time. Loose materials, another one, giving them some stones and rocks and things like that, and say, look, I have all the things that Allah created. Now let's make something out of it. So you start the foundational building, and then while in vigilance, you let them play, and it can be done with multiple kids. I hope that's useful.
Wonderful. Thank you. My another question is, my child is 15 months old, and how do I teach spirituality and ethics to him?
At 15 months, they can sit by themselves, right? So I love treasure baskets because it's such a simple way of doing that. So you can give them a treasure basket, you can read books with them. We know that reading book does not have an age limit. You can start prenatally when the child's in the womb and they can hear you, all the way lifelong. So reading books, we talked about, I gave you some suggestions of reading books together, and you can harp that spiritual and ethical development. Another thing is repetition, just introducing those terminologies, right? Maulana Hazar Imam, showing a picture of Maulana Hazar Imam and playing peekaboo with it, right? Just for that identity marker, who that person is, how we love them, talking about looking at different Allah's creation around when you go on a walk, when you're in the house, you're cooking something. Very easily, you can do such wonderful things.
Okay, so the next one is my son is 3 years old, and when he's eating in front of the screen, the parent doesn't want that to happen. But if they remove the screen, the child would just refuse to eat. In that situation, what should be done?
So screen time is the most popular area right now because of COVID. We know we've been provided, I'm sure all of you in UAE must be provided with guidelines as well, that below the age of 2, as much as possible, no screen time unless they're talking to family members, which is important during the time of COVID. With 3, you have to start putting restrictions. I know at this point you have a routine, a habit of eating happens with screen time, but probably reducing it bit by bit. I think you can put some limitations and say, okay, we're gonna start the timer, or we're gonna start an alarm or something like that. At 45 minutes, it's done. We're not going screen time. So you're reducing the time rather than taking it completely off. And building that in. I think sometimes that really helps. And just be a little bit firm, but with lots of love. That's what firm attachment is. That no, we said 45 minutes. You haven't got your 45 minutes. Now the computer or the iPad has to be shut off. So it's hard when the child's used to it, but I think you can start limiting it gradually and stick to the rules, please, but with love and affection.
All right. So I think my last question here, when there are some unpleasant situations like death in the family or any unpleasant situation, and we have a toddler, or maybe somebody, having 2-3 children, how do you put that across and take it into a positive vibe where the children are not feeling scared, but they also know the concept that there are pleasant situations and unpleasant situations?
Before we go into that question, I know Nermin suggested a wonderful screen time replacement. I think that's wonderful, by reading books and just distracting as an alternative to screen time. That's a great suggestion. Particularly with death, we always say in the field that you talk to the child honestly. There are resources out there to talk about death or unpleasant situation in the family. There's a wonderful book by Todd Parr. I think it's called, it's about a fish that died. And the parents talk about it, how there are people who might not be with us anymore. And it's a great way of talking about it. But one of the things that you have to be very mindful is that you are honest to the child rather than sugarcoating it, because children would admire that. From a parent when they're honest and say, yeah, grandma is not there anymore with us, but she loves you, and looking at the pictures, reminding them how beautiful she was and how wonderful and how much she loved. It's called The Goodbye Book. Thanks, Shafaq. Yeah, it's called The Goodbye Book by Todd Parr, and it's a beautiful book to talk about death. Similarly, if someone's ill in the family, talk about, oh, they're not feeling well. Would you like to make a thank you card for them? Let's go visit them. Be very honest with the child because that goes a long way, and that's going to help you in a relationship. Now, when you're honest, you also have to be careful that this is a child and would understand concept like the soul going or all those things. So make it child friendly, keep it very simple, but don't sugarcoat it in the sense that they'll come back one day or things like that. Be honest in that regard. I hope that's helpful. But yeah, I recommend this book by Todd Parr quite a lot.
Thank you, Nahid. I think Sindhu has raised her hand, so we'll take this last question. Parents, if you have more questions, you can write to us and we will make sure that we reply to you.
Hi, Ali Madad, everyone. My name is Sindhu. I just put the question of 3 years in my son. He's 3 years. He going to uptown school. When he too much tired after the school, but he's sleepy. He said, I say, Faris, it's at lunchtime. He said, Mama, first I want screen. Right now, I want to screen. I say, Faris, okay, I give you 15 minutes. Then after 2 or 3 days, I say 10 minutes. Then after 3 days, I say 5 minutes. Then after 1 day, I say, Faris, only 3 minutes. Mama, how much 3 minutes? It's possible I want 3 minutes screen? It's finished. 1, 2, 3, it's a finish. Now I want to more. So how I can do this one? Because when I give the food, he say, without the screen, I don't eat.
Yeah.
Even the snack time, I say, Faris, it's a banana. You just eat it. Come on, do fast. No, I want first a screen, then I want.
yeah. These are habits, and screen time is one of the most challenging habits to break. And one day, if I get a chance, I'll do a screen time session or send you some materials if you need. But what's happening with screen time on the brain is that the brain's getting this surge of activity. When you're reading a book, when you're doing a play, it's only one part of the brain that's lighting up. That's why screens are so addictive, because it lights up your brain in all areas, because you're watching, you're hearing, you're interacting and things. So one of the hardest habits to break.
Even if we eat, I say, Faris, what you make today, what you eat today, he don't know what we do.
Yeah,
You know,
because he's
and
so,
food-
all his senses are
yeah.
concentrated on that screen.
Faris,
So,
today we eat chapati, we eat chicken, but Faris don't reply. Even he just say, leave it, and I want to see the video like this.
yeah, and this is one of the biggest and the hardest habits. So I would recommend taking your time to break it. So over a
Okay.
span of month, you just reduce a minute, 2 minutes.
Oh.
So rather than cutting it off right away, because the child will notice, they're smart, doing
Yeah.
it bit by bit, and then having some sort of interaction after, playing with the food, doing something fun. I remember, like, with our family, it was the same thing, and they replaced with photo album and say, oh, who's that? Let's look, and then they feed them the food. So do it gradually. Don't cut it off, because the child will know and it'll call you out on it. So try that. I hope that works. But yes, it's important that you gradually try to reduce it, because it's also compromising on your quality of attachment, right? Because he's staring at the screen and you don't get that quality time with your child.
Oh,
So I'd just like to put this through. How do we make sure in diverse cultures and Western impact to make sure that our kids are not impacted by other cultures? So if there's anything that you can shed your light on it.
So, this is my philosophy, that everybody's culture has something to learn from, and that's something that the pluralistic elements go in. So I'm not sure what the question's about, but I think it's a wonderful thing that the child's learning about different cultures. But then what you can do in order to strengthen your own identity, say, these people do this, but we do this in our household, right? So you can, exposing the child to different cultures is not a bad thing. It's actually a really good thing, because that's something they're going to do when they grow up. They're going to see their friends have habits that are different from them. But then you can reiterate and say, but we, as our family, do this. This is what we eat. Other people don't eat that, but we eat that as a family. Mommy eats that, daddy eats that. So you're reiterating that there are multiple things, there are beautiful things, without labeling it negative. But then you reinforce what your identity is. I think that's one thing that we want to harp, that you have to expose the child to diversity, because that's the world that we live in now. So there's no avoiding that, but just reiterating what your identity, what your values, what your personal beliefs are, time and time again.
All right, sorry, I have one question, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Sorry. All right, thanks, mentor, for guiding us to the right path, that where are we supposed to take our kids to, and how the culture is supposed to be brought in. As well as me, not only from India, but from the multiple places. As we know, we have multiple cultures there. Is it a good time to introduce different cultures to the kids who are between age 4 to 6? Or shall we wait for some time? Because, as we see multiple things happening worldwide nowadays, and it's good time, because we just don't have Jamaat Khana in one area, but we have multiple other religions too along with us and during those prayer times. So do you suggest that is it the right time to introduce those things to those kids right now, or shall we wait for some more time to make them understand?
Altaf, you asked a very relevant and a very important question. So I actually did my thesis in pluralism at my master's course. And I did a study, I did an intervention, that what happens when you introduce the child at the age of 2 or 3 to pluralism. How? By reading books about different cultures, by showing them pictures. So I did this experiment study, intervention study, and the results of it showed, based on my limited sample size, is that not only it's helping the child create feelings, understanding of the world, but it's also helping them with language development. So they learn new vocabulary, they learn new concepts, and it's actually helping them in social, emotional, as well as language. So there's no good time but now to introduce it. And like I said, you talk about your own values and say, this is what we do. You bring in a fabric from your culture, a food from your culture, and say, this is what mommy or daddy ate when they were young. This is something what we call, kheer or something. But then there are other people that make kheer different ways, rather than, so just celebrating and talking about it, no good time than this to do this. Perfect. To start this on.
Thank you. Thank you so much for answering.
Parents, I'm certain that we have learned a great deal and benefited from Nahid Mukhi's experience in the field of early childhood development. Nahid, on behalf of the entire SEEDS team, we thank you for joining us today and sharing your insights about spiritual and ethical development in early years through play.